Okay, we will reconvene, council colleagues. Thank you. As some of you have gathered, it was necessary for us to meet in closed at 5 p.m. So at that time, we did adopt the agenda, but we did not read the land acknowledgement. So I'll look to a council colleague to read the land acknowledgement, please. Anyone? Anyone? Councillor Sullivan? Okay.
The municipality of North Grenville acknowledges that the municipality operates on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe. We honor the historic relationship of the Haudenosaunee and Huron-Wendat peoples to this land. We recognize all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who now call North Grenville their home. We respect and support the need for cultivating a strong relationship with all Indigenous peoples, and we look forward to continuing this conversation and fostering the path towards reconciliation.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We also know that June is a significant month. I believe it's Indigenous History Month. So our municipality has been preparing to certainly share some information about both local and regional events that'll be taking place. So look forward to that. And also, of course, many of you are aware that on Saturday, the local Pride community convened a fantastic parade, and weather was great, unlike today, but a beautiful day for a beautiful parade. And it was wonderful to see so many people come out in solidarity or in pride. So really grateful for the leadership in the community that makes those sorts of events possible. I'll just move to disclosures of interest, colleagues. I know we quickly did this in closed, but just looking to open items. Any disclosures of interest? I'm not seeing any. Thank you. Then I will look to Ms. Jeannot. We just have a couple of reports coming out of closed, or are you going to deal with them later, Ms. Jeannot? Okay.
We just have to appoint a few committee members to various committees. So be it resolved that council appoint John Redmond to the Property Standards Committee, as well as Lisa McKinley to the Arts and Culture Committee. And additionally, be it resolved that council appoint the following members to the Indigenous Advisory Circle: Joshua Katuk-Eluk, Philip Seymour, Patty McDonald, and Lorraine recommends.
Perfect. Thank you. And I know we're excited to get the Indigenous Circle going, and it will be at this time Indigenous led, and those 4 individuals will have the opportunity to sort of determine how they'd like to meet going forward, and how they would like to provide guidance to the municipality. So we appreciate that those 4 individuals came forward for our Indigenous Advisory Circle, in addition to the other individuals who've stepped up for other committees. We do have a proposed delegation, but we do not have the representative from Smile Canada here. But certainly there is a proposed recommendation coming from their request for council to consider, I think, what has been a reoccurring day, and that is June 18th as longest day of Smiles in North Grenville. Would any council colleague like to read the recommendation that is being presented to us? Unfortunately, they were not able to be present, so I'll invite Councillor Wilson perhaps to read the recommendation. Thank you.
Longest Day of Smiles. Whereas Operation Smile Canada is a global medical charity providing free, life-changing surgeries and medical care to children born with cleft conditions around the world. And whereas every 3 minutes a child is born with a cleft condition, and lack of access to safe, effective surgery means that easily treatable conditions like cleft lip and cleft palate can become fatal, and whereas Operation Smile Canada believes every child born with a cleft condition deserves exceptional surgical care. And whereas the Longest Day of Smiles will unite Canadians from coast to coast as we raise awareness and funds And whereas on June 18th, 2023, the citizens of North Grenville are encouraged to learn more about how to support this worthy cause by visiting www.longestdayofsmiles.ca. And whereas our community can help celebrate the Longest Day of Smiles by posting hashtag Longest Day of Smiles on social media. And be it resolved that the municipality of North Grenville do hereby proclaim June 18th, 2023 as Longest Day of Smiles in North Grenville and commend its thoughtful observance to all citizens of our municipality.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. So we'll take that as you're moving that motion for the recognition on June 18th, and I'll look for a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Barclay. And the motion is on the floor. Are there any comments or questions? Not seeing any. I'll call the question. All in favor? Call the vote. Thank you. And next, we'll move on to our consent agenda. As we all are aware, items on the agenda are considered routine and no longer require further discussion and are enacted in one motion. Would any council colleague like to pull any proposed consent agenda item? Not seeing anyone, so I'll look for a mover and a seconder then for items listed under the consent agenda. Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Strachan, thank you very much. So with no further comment, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Thank you. And if you'll just indulge me for a second, there was one item that it doesn't require a decision, but just for context, the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus Paramedic Service Report is on consent. And I just want to advise that myself, as Warden of the United Counties, and 3 neighboring counties are meeting tomorrow to come together and collaborate in order to approach the City of Ottawa about establishing a financial arrangement so that we're reimbursed for some of the paramedic time that is spent in Ottawa. It's become very apparent among the 4 neighboring counties outside of the City of Ottawa that we are increasingly being impacted by having ambulances go into Ottawa. They get stuck in Ottawa because of long transfers at hospitals, and as a consequence, there was quite a bit in the media over the last couple of months about the fact that the City of Ottawa appears to be one of the only larger urban centers in Ontario that doesn't sort of reimburse and reconcile at the end of the year. So just to say, if you're curious about that item, part of what we're dealing with when it comes to paramedic services is that financial reconciliation, if you will, and I'm hopeful that we can provide a further update this fall. So moving on, we have minutes of previous meetings, but those were dealt with under consent. So then we'll go to reports. Very exciting that we'll invite our acting CAO to speak to 25th anniversary events that have been under discussion for many, many months now, and will allow North Grenville to properly mark its 25th anniversary. So over to you, Ms. Dunlop.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the purpose of this report is to allocate funds towards the celebration of the 25th anniversary of North Grenville. Next slide. 2023 is the 25th anniversary of the creation of the amalgamated municipality of North Grenville, which was created through the amalgamation of the former townships of Oxford-on-Rideau and South Gore and the town of Kemptville in January 1998. An internal staff committee was created to come up with a celebration and recognition program for our anniversary. This includes a series of council meetings in some of the hamlets, a temporary new flag and logo, and the creation of a mayoral chain of office to be unveiled and presented to past and present mayors. Next slide. Roy Brown has provided a history and a request to create a North Grenville chain of office, which has been included in your agenda package this evening. A chain of office is a visual symbol of the leadership of the administration of a municipal government, which the majority of all our surrounding municipalities have. North Grenville has received multiple requests by Roy Brown for the consideration and creation of a chain of office over the years. Today, I hope to receive the authorization to proceed with such a creation. Next slide. As part of the proposed 25th anniversary year of celebration, a chart of proposed costs has been provided. The items include a flag and February 25th logo, advertising, AV for our Hamlet meetings, a North Grenville chain of office, and a September celebration event. The total is estimated at $30,000. Next slide. 4 community associations have participated in the planning: the Oxford Mills Community Association, the Burritt Rapids Community Association, Bishop Mills Community Association, and the Kemptville District Community Association. Citizen advisors were invited to informally participate in the design of the mayoral chain of office, including Cal Pominville, former councillor and municipal clerk, Roy Brown, former executive of the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 212, Heather Render, former deputy clerk, and David Delaney, former councillor. Next slide. The recommendation is to approve the transfer of $30,000 from general reserves for the expenses of the proposed 25th anniversary of the amalgamation of the Municipality of North Grenville program. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, I know I'm very excited by the prospect of meeting in the Hamlets, as is proposed to mark the 25th anniversary celebration before a culminating event in September where we would gather all past councillors and mayors, not just from the town of Kemptville, but from our other townships, to properly recognize the incredible history and public service those individuals obviously gave. So we'll just look to council colleagues. Any questions in regards to the anniversary? Okay, not seeing any. So there will be more information on where we will be hosting the Hamlet events, in particular Burritt's, Bishop's, Oxford Mills, and ultimately the town of Kemptville, or here at our municipal center in Kemptville. Later in September. So I'm sure for those who are listening and keen to learn more, we'll provide a summary of all those dates. But really the culminating event will be in September, which will be well advertised and open to the public. So I'll look for a mover and a seconder then for the budget adjustment for the 25th anniversary. Thank you, Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Wilson. The recommendation is that we approve the transfer of $30,000 from general reserves for expenses related to celebrating the 25th anniversary in incorporation of the Municipality of North Grenville. Seeing no comments from colleagues, I'll call the vote. All in favor, please. Good. Thank you. Client services general update. Do we have one this evening? Reports. Excellent. So with that, indeed. Okay, so we'll move on to corporate services, correct? Right. So we'll look to you, Ms. Jeannot, for a couple of those items.
Thank you. We did touch on the Indigenous Advisory Circle appointments already, so I'll jump to the repeal of the Chief Administrative Officer delegation. So Bylaw 2022-20 was adopted during the COVID-19 pandemic, and this was done to allow for business continuity while meetings of council were suspended. And just to highlight, those delegations that were given during that bylaw were the appointment and removal of municipal officers, disposal of property exceeding $50,000, and the award request for proposals and tenders exceeding $50,000. So tonight we're just seeking council to repeal that bylaw, which means that all these items that fall under these categories will come back to council. And that concludes the presentation.
And council, you may remember this was a result of a previous discussion where it became obvious that we hadn't repealed that delegation of authority bylaw, which was implemented during the pandemic, and thought it was prudent to do so now, given that we're fully functioning and able to meet under far more regular circumstances. So with that in mind, I'll just look for a mover and a seconder, please, for the repeal of bylaw 2220. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Wilson, thank you. Any comments or questions on this? Not seeing any. I'll call the vote then. All in favor, please. Good. And the next two items are consent, so they've been addressed. I would like to say, if you're paying close attention to the agenda, that For the meeting times in the hamlets, there was a request from the community associations that we start meetings at 7, not 6:30, and as a consequence, we've had to adjust the procedural bylaw that stipulates when council starts its meetings, though of course we have been a little bit late in the last couple. But that adjustment was necessary to honor how the community associations would like to have an informal gathering in community halls prior to the council meetings that will be occurring in the hamlets. So that's just a bit of context. I think I can now turn it over to Chief Oakham for our next update. Have you concluded your, okay. I'll go to Chief Oakham.
Thank you, Mayor Beckford. Good evening to you and council. I do have a report this evening. The report is seeking council's approval to fund the capital shortfall from reserve funds for the replacement of self-contained breathing apparatus. Next slide, please. Self-contained breathing apparatus, otherwise known as SCBA, is the life safety equipment that provides the wearer with breathing air supplied from an air tank through full face piece mask. An SCBA is worn by firefighters as part of their safety ensemble when they are within a hazardous atmosphere. All firefighter protective equipment and apparel must be manufactured and maintained in accordance with the respective standards. An SCBA is certified to NFPA standards. Annual testing and inspections are completed to ensure the equipment is maintained to that standard. The SCBA is a requirement under the Occupational Health and Safety Act for the employer to provide the worker to perform their work. Next slide. North Grenville currently employs 40-plus firefighters. There is approximately 16 SCBA assemblies currently in use by the North Grenville Fire Service. The existing assemblies are 20-plus year old and have been maintained to date. The existing SCBA are several standard cycles old. The existing SCBA are dated technology and no longer contain the newer, do not contain newer technology and safety systems that new SCBA today contain. The existing composite air cylinders have a 10-year life remaining, and therefore we are not purchasing new cylinders. The cylinder valves must be replaced to be compatible with the SCBA and was part of our tender process. Each firefighter is also provided with a face piece, a mask, that has been fit tested for each individual. The existing masks are 3 years old and do not need to be replaced and are not part of the tender. Next slide, please. This slide provides council with an illustration of a complete SCBA assembly. The face piece, which is the mask, is provided to each firefighter, and as I mentioned earlier, these are not being replaced. The cost of a new mask is $530 each. This is a savings of $21,200. The next component is a compressed air cylinder and is required for each SCBA, and we also require spares to change out during operations. We are not replacing air cylinders and will be utilizing existing cylinders. The cost of a carbon cylinder is $1,170 each. This is a savings of $52,650. The SCBA assembly is what is being replaced. We tendered for 20 units. The tender price placed at a cost of $7,372 each, for a total of $147,440. The existing air cylinder requires compatible valves, so 45 valves are required to be installed at a cost of $28,620 in total. Next slide, please. 2023 capital budget submissions included the project to replace the SCBA assemblies with 20 new units at an estimated cost of $161,000. This project was approved by council. Since North Grenville had invested in replacing air cylinders and masks in recent years, the decision to replace only SCBA assemblies with the same manufacturing brand was the most economical choice, plus staff are completely familiar and well-trained with the existing brand. This resulted in a single-source tender and purchase. Every brand of SCBA on the market has its own proprietary components, meaning that brands are not compatible with other brands. The tender received by North Grenville was for $176,060, just over $15,000 above the capital budget estimate. The increased cost from manufacturers, inflation, and the status of the Canadian dollar are the contributing factors to the additional costs from when budgets were originally prepared. It is recommended that the deficit in the tender be funded from the reserve funds, and that is my report.
Thank you very much. Any questions, colleagues? We know that Chief Okuma has had his eye on this for some time, and obviously fairly essential equipment, as I know we can appreciate today, given what we're confronting in Ontario and Quebec, or Eastern Ontario and Quebec. So I'll look for a mover and a seconder then to advance the motion. Deputy Mayor Barclay, Councillor Sullivan, thank you. And obviously that the recommendation is that Council approve funds from reserves to finance the 2023 capital shortfall for the project to replace the self-contained breathing apparatuses for the fire service. If there are no further comments, I'm going to call the vote. All in favor, please? Good. Thank you for your diligence, Chief Okuma. I know these will make a difference and hopefully allow you to sleep a little bit better at night once you have them in hand. How long does it take to actually get the new equipment?
According to the manufacturer with this brand, because we're not going with cylinders and masks, those are the items that are on back order. The actual assemblies are readily available. We should have them within 1.5 months.
Perfect. Yep. Excellent. Well, keep us posted, please.
For sure.
All right, we'll move on to finance. Mr. Ogurende is with us this evening. I want to congratulate Mr. Ogurende on the birth of his second child. So I know he's busy at home and at work with two young children, but thank you for, amid all of that, putting your mind to this policy. It's something that Council is excited about, so we welcome your presentation.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next slide, please. So the purpose of this policy is to kickstart the conversation with Council tonight about a community programming fund that we're looking to create. And the background is the municipality has received various requests in the past, but there wasn't a policy in place to sort of guide how we receive these requests or how they are considered by Council. So staff were directed to look into the creation of a policy that will streamline the process going forward. Next slide. So the policy is aiming to state that requests will be received through either the clerk's office or the office of the CAO as a delegation to Council, and this will depend on scheduling availability. Council will have the opportunity to receive the request and deliberate upon the request based on the guidelines within the policy. If the request is approved by Council, the requesting party will be required to sign an agreement with the municipality, and upon the signing of the agreement, funds will be disbursed. Next slide. So to create this fund, staff is requesting that a one-time transfer from the municipality's general reserves to the tune of $150,000 be transferred into the community programming fund. The interest and principal repayment from the disbursement will be paid directly back into the fund, and there will be a maximum limit on the fund to the tune of $150,000 at the end of the year. So any overages coming from interest payments will go back into the general reserve. So at this time, I'm happy to take any questions or feedback from Council.
For For sure. And before recognizing Deputy Mayor Barkley, I think some of the context for this was the international plowing match, where we did lend $100,000 to create the conditions for IPM to come to the town of Kemptville. I'm very happy to report that in December they handed the municipality a check in full for what had been advanced to them. So that was part of stimulating a conversation, and I'm sure Deputy Mayor will add more context for how we might be able to enable certain events, not through grants, which are not repayable, but through sort of a lending program, if you will, but often for larger amounts where individuals or organizations are seeking to bring signature events to the community. So, Deputy Mayor, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Mr. Ogrande. A couple of, I think some details or some requests on our behalf. I'd like to articulate. Some of the guidelines are very general. You refer to them as highlights, that there should be, and I should go to the actual detail, but no prior ask. So we're looking at one-offs. We referred to it internally as like a catalyst fund to stimulate larger events, cultural events, that really were beyond the scope of a community grant. We've seen the community grants program increase over the years from prior councils, a total of $15,000 to, I think this year was $98,000 that we granted. But as the community grows and I guess experience and knowledge of how to run larger events, we're increasingly being approached for larger sums of money. And I think a loan program makes a lot of sense that's repayable. So given that, some of the other guidelines, there should be a clear benefit to the community, obviously. And another guideline suggested is all other sources exhausted. Now, I'm wondering if the way some of these events are pulled together, whether we would have some way of evaluating them where a sole source, in other words, if a project was looking for 100% financing from the municipality, whether that would, qualify at a lower rate or a lower priority. What I'm thinking of, there should be, I'd like to see some sort of cap that no more than 75% or 60%, or whatever percentage you think is appropriate, would be the maximum that we'd contribute, and that they could value their in-kind contribution towards the total project cost, because obviously a lot of these events are raised through volunteers. One thing that I'd like to see in the guidelines too is in the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee, and I think Director Guy could correct me, I think we have adopted a fair use policy in which how you would value performing artists, musicians, theater folk would be at a fair trade rate, which is an understood, it's lower than union rates, but we would value that volunteer contribution according to the fair rate. I think that should be part of the guidelines. Finally, I think there should be, in your guidelines, you state a clear path to repay it. I think we would want to give people enough time, given that this is a catalyst fund, and I would think it might, generate annual events. They'd have 2 or 3 years to repay. I'd like to see some flexibility in terms of the terms of the loan. Finally, when it came to an interest rate, I understand we're obliged when we're granting to revenue-generating events to charge an interest rate, and I'm sure it's prescribed what that rate would be, prime plus something, I would imagine. That interest would be not compounded monthly, but payable at the end of the term, so that with groups applying for this fund, they could know exactly what the total cost would be, the total repayment cost. Those are just some of my comments on the draft proposal here, and I think it's a great step forward for the community and for those organizations, public and private, that want to charge admission to their events, of launching bigger and better events in the community. Thanks.
And I'll recognize Councillor Strahan, but just thinking about the international plowing match, it was about a 2.5-year repayment period. So that seed money, right, that led to the generation of, the organization and the generation of revenue to repay back the municipality to take a couple of years. So I think you're right. Realistic timelines are appropriate. Councillor Strahan, please.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I took notes, unfortunately, on my electronic notepad, and it just died on me, so hopefully I can remember what it was I was going to say. I think regarding the repayment, the policy itself is somewhat maybe intentionally ambiguous about the definition of an organization, because I think any group could come together with great ideas, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they have the finances already backing them to go forward. So I think maybe some clarity as to how we would define the organization or what we would expect to see from them as far as their financial records so that they have the ability to repay. The document itself, the policy itself refers to the fund shall only be accessed as a last resort funding option when it's demonstrable that the program is at high risk of cancellation due to funding. I'm not sure that that's entirely accurate because I don't know if it's due to potential of cancellation. It could be that it can't even get off the ground. So maybe some semantics here, but it doesn't necessarily have to be at risk of being canceled, but maybe at risk from actually coming to life at all. I had two other points, and I cannot remember them. Sorry. So those are my points for now. If I think of them, I'll come back to them. Apologies. Thank you.
So maybe just, Councillor Strahan, to buy you a little bit of time, and maybe I'm suggesting perhaps that we just strike that particular line that says the fund shall be accessed as a last resort funding option, right? When it is demonstrable that it is at a high risk of cancellation. I take both your points. They may have other granting opportunities, but may not be able to close the gap. And to your point, Councillor Strahan, it may be a case of getting it off the ground versus canceling it. So I think, Mr. Argoment, unless you have an objection, I think we scratch that one line. I think the spirit of the policy is still very much.
Yeah, through your worship. Actually, the reason why we included that particular phrase was to sort of encourage the organizers or the groups or the organization to actually consider other sources of funding, such as grants or financing, bridge financing from financial institutions, and only come to the municipality as the last option, as it were.
Maybe I think the words we're struggling with is last resort funding option. I think it's a supplementary funding option. I'm not sure that I would agree that it's a last resort, if you will, but it's an important source of funding for sure. So, Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Yeah, I understand the reason for including that, but I also understand the Mayor's point. Perhaps what we're looking for is a question in the application or in the delegation of what other sources that they've approached or anticipate to approaching, so that we make sure that they do look at other sources of funding, that they're just not relying on the municipality solely for their funding that they've explored. Yes. I chafed at the exhaustive word, because I think maybe a lot of these groups are exhausted just trying to formulate it, let alone fund it.
And Councillor Strahan, please.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. I remembered my last 2 points. One was regarding the maximum amount that could be requested by any group, because obviously $150,000, it could go really far, it could not go very far depending on the type of event. So perhaps some clarity. I know that the Deputy Mayor has suggested a percentage of the total for the cost of a particular event, but perhaps there should be an upper limit so that not one group would request the entire envelope if there were multiple requesters. And the other thing that ties into that is the timing of the requests, because I would assume that we have an intake window for these kinds of requests like we would for community grants, but that isn't stated in there. And if it's open throughout the whole year, then we would have to hold back funds with the potential of not using them throughout the year, just depending on when the requests come in. So neither one of those are really clarified in the policy. I don't know if that was intentional or not.
Through your worship, The reason why it was done this way was to give council an opportunity to actually sort of, consider the request. And if it was then agreed by council that, the funding should go ahead at that time, at any time of the year, then we'll be able to go into the further details of how exactly it will be structured, and the repayment and etc.
So I'm a little bit preoccupied with last resort funding option, and I'm just wondering, council colleagues or Femi, do you have other language? Because it's not language I'm comfortable with. Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor. I wanted to follow up on Councillor Starkian's concern. If we're giving these organizations 3 years to repay it, I'm wondering if we couldn't have an annual cap so that we don't exhaust the fund in one single year. I think maybe the original consideration was $50,000 a year, but as it cycles through, we have to replenish the fund and keep, to continue to stimulate some of these programs. So something like a cap per year. I like the idea, actually, of being able to have delegations throughout the year, but not necessarily a first come, first serve. I'm not sure how we would manage that. There's pros and cons to both, because the timing of these events are not all happening in the summer, so we should be able to, once they're ready to make a delegation, we should be prepared to consider it.
Okay. Another comment from Councillor Strachan?
Yes, back to the Deputy Mayor, through you, Madam Mayor. Maybe the option is to also have two different intakes or something like that throughout the year, so that it doesn't just favor the ones that have figured things out in the spring, but the ones that come through in the fall. But I think there needs to be some sort of a way of managing that. Otherwise, you either spend everything up front or you wind up with money left at the end of the year. Like, it could go either way if we don't have some way of delineating. So, a bunch of different options. Thank you.
Okay. Femi, did you want to respond to any of the comments made right now?
No, not at this point, Worship. I'm just taking back all of the feedback,
Yes.
And then we'll have further conversations at the staff level, and we might be bringing back another policy or a revised version.
Okay, so council's provided some feedback. Colleagues, are you comfortable if we defer a couple of weeks? I think we're keen to see it in place, right, mid-year, because we know there are some events out there that may be watching to see if this policy could support them. But for sure, if we take a couple of weeks to strengthen the policy and incorporate some of that feedback, I'm comfortable if council is. We good? Okay, perfect. Thank you again for your work.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. It's an important policy for the municipality, and you want a motion to defer. All right, Councillor Sullivan. Okay. Okay, Deputy Mayor, we've seconded. I'll call the question. All in favor, please. Good. So we'll move on now to our Parks, Rec and Culture. I understand that the prospect of lighting and potentially additional electrical outlets is being contemplated, given the diligent work that is being undertaken to revitalize Riverside Park. So I'll turn it to you, Mr. Guy.
Thank you very much, Mayor Peckford. So I have a report this evening on outdoor rink lighting at Riverside Park. Next slide, please. So outdoor rink lighting was not part of the original design and tender document for the overall Riverside Park Pool House project. Staff recognized the omission and requested a design and quote for Braun Construction to include light standards and fixtures for the 50 by 100 outdoor rink at Riverside Park. Next slide. After review of the initial quote from Braun Construction, $68,000. The final quote for the outdoor rink lighting is $45,366.27 plus HST. Quotes were reviewed by municipal staff and Architecture 49 for accuracy and review. The proposed system provides an average 330 lumens and a maximum of 567 lumens, which will provide good lighting conditions on site. The system will provide even distribution of light with little to no glare issues. The lighting system is dark sky compliant with a light fixture that will point down to minimize light spill onto neighboring properties. Staff did consider a separate tender for the outdoor rink lighting it was determined there would be no cost savings to this approach due to the excavation costs that would incur if we did it on our own, as excavation is already ongoing at the park. Outdoor rink lighting is obviously crucial to maximizing programming hours during the ice season. Next slide, please. So the staff recommended quote was to install outdoor rink lighting, as I mentioned, at $45,366.27. Financing for this project will be included in the debt financing plan for the overall Riverside Park Pool House project. And that is my report. I can follow up on the other issues if you prefer, Mayor Peckford.
Yes, of course, in the spirit of anticipating needs that weren't necessarily well established in the revitalization plan. Of course, you are aware that we've been fielding some requests for how to ensure full functionality of the park for various events that take place, winter and summer, and that it appears that we may need to anticipate some additional outlets, I don't know what to call them, power sources that do the trick for larger events. So if you could speak to that as well, so potentially we deal with both tonight, that would be helpful.
Sure. So currently at the park, at Diamond One, we have a 200 amp service with 5 20 amp circuits. They're GFI protected. That service is full. We cannot add any more power to that particular service at Diamond One. At the tennis court, we also have a 200 amp service with 1 20 amp plug. There is capacity there to add more plugs. As part of the design, we'd asked for some new circuits to be planned for the mechanical room within the new accessible building. However, due to the recent community ask, we have asked the engineer to look at repositioning those plugs on the west side of the outdoor rink. Probably what we'll ask them to do is add some plugs to the actual light standard pole, which would be encased in a steel box with a padlock that could be accessed on that side of the park near the playground area for community events. We'll also ask for a plug on the southeast corner of the outdoor rink as well. So we're looking at probably 4 extra spaces in and around the outdoor rink. On the west side, southeast side of the outdoor rink, we'll ask for some extra plugs. I can't at this time provide a cost for that. But we'll be getting some information back from the engineer likely within the next couple of days. So we are looking at repositioning those plugs from the initial idea of putting them in the mechanical room.
And to your point about GFCI power outlets, these are...
Ground fault protection?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they would do the trick.
They'll all have that.
Okay. Great. I think that certainly gives us some comfort in terms of how certain events are convened. Obviously, music and festivals and many other events appear to need power. So I think the more that we can establish it up front, we don't have to go back and do it later. And certainly the requests we've been fielding from a couple of sources include northwest corner, southwest corner, southeast corner. Is that correct? So that's what we would ultimately have then?
Yes.
Okay.
If I can add, for this year's Canada Day event, due to the loss of the sort of the event space due to the new amenities that we're having, we are allowing the Canada Day sort of tent and event area to be set up on Diamond One at Riverside Park. It wasn't something in the past that we really wanted to do, but with we have some more resources now within our park staff, and we feel that we can accommodate that the event there this year and still have the ball diamond in good shape after the event's over for the continuation of baseball.
Great. Well, that's great news because we know how popular Riverside Park is for Canada Day. Okay, so we'll just, I'll recognize Councillor Sullivan, and of course we have 2 items. We've been dealing a little bit with the electrical service in Riverside Park, but of course the lighting is also a fundamental feature. So over to you, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you to Director Guy. Thank you for picking up on this, the omission of the lights, because I think it's important that we realized and take care of it as quickly as possible during the construction. So my question is, two questions. One is, it seems like the lighting that was installed at the courts, the tennis and pickleball courts, may be more than is actually required. It's very bright. And I'm just wondering, is that something that's being considered here? Is it a possibility that what they're recommending is more than is actually needed? Just because looking back, we may not have needed so many lights on the courts. So that's the first question.
Good question. I can only tell you through based on the design, the fact that it's a 50 feet by 100 foot ice surface area. The recommendation was 2 20-foot poles with 2 fixtures on each poles. They're like floodlights. And that was based on the size. I can only tell you with respect to the tennis courts, it was done the exact same way. It was through a design process and based on, and that was what they told us that was required. So I'm not, until we see them up there, it's hard to say. We can only go on what's recommended, and that's what we're following.
Okay, thank you for that. And the second question then is, down the road, I think there's a plan that we would put a future roof or covering over this ice surface area so that it could be used as a pavilion during the summer for maybe events. And will the installation of these light poles have an effect on the possibility of putting a future roof or cover over that?
Well, they'd have to be removed. The light standards would have to be removed. And I think if I can go back to maybe why it wasn't part of the original design, I think that's where the confusion took place, was that there was discussion at the conceptual plan idea and then even at the detailed design that we would plan this rink for a future roof. I think that's why the lights initially got missed in the design, because they were thinking once the roof is there, there'll be lights. However, there's no timeline on the roof construction, and to maximize programming at the outdoor rink, especially in the wintertime when it's dark at 5:30 at night, we obviously need some lights. But in the case of if the roof was planned at some point and become a reality, we would have to remove the light standards. But they may be able to be put somewhere else where there's a necessity for lights.
Okay.
With the amount of ball diamonds we have, and there's always going to be needs to replace light standards and poles. Diamond 1 at Riverside Park, we're almost near the end of the useful life of those poles on Diamond 1. So I think there would be an opportunity to reuse them for sure.
Okay, thanks very much.
Any other questions in regards to this? I'm assuming the bulk of the cost is running the power, right? It's not the poles themselves. It's sort of the running the power to the refrigerated outdoor rink. Is that right, Mr. Guy?
For the lights?
Yes, for the lights. Or is it a combination of things?
It's a combination.
Okay.
The fixtures, the poles, and the wiring was about $28,000, and then the excavation work was around $15,000.
I see. Okay.
To get light standards there.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify what's driving the cost, because for 2 poles, it seems like a lot, but clearly there's quite a bit involved in getting them up and running.
Yeah, and I would say that, like everything else, costs have just increased so much since COVID time. And, we did the light standards for the tennis courts prior to COVID, and it was actually only about $10,000 more than these for, I think there's 8 standards there. So it's incredible, the price increase.
Okay. That being said, I think obviously we appreciate the fact that we expect the outdoor rink to be extremely well utilized day and night. So there's real value in making sure that we can get full value out of the facility, to your point. So, council colleagues, the recommendation is before you to approve the rink lighting quote provided by Braun Construction to install 2 light standards and fixtures at a cost of $45,000, $366.27, and that this cost be covered within the debt financing plan to be in place for Riverside Park. I'm going to assume that the electrical service that we just spoke of can be accommodated within the existing plan in terms of some of those power sources you were articulating.
Yes, due to the fact that we're still heavy into the construction of the whole pool house project,
Right.
that'll be part of the finished product.
Great, thank you. All right, looking for a mover and a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Looking to my left, Councillor Strachian. I will call the question, not seeing other hands. All in favor, please. Good, thank you. That carries. We'll move on now to our Housing Accelerator Fund, and I think we're welcoming Mr. Mosher. And certainly appreciate that our planning department has had to work rather quickly to mobilize on a very important federal funding opportunity that could significantly enable some affordable housing that we talk about a lot, but that has been hard to deliver on in its entirety. So welcome, Mr. Mosher. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, so if we could go to the next slide, please. So a written report has been prepared. I'm going to just briefly talk about it, but the purpose of tonight is to present it to Council for information and to seek some feedback on some of the issues that would be included within the Housing Accelerator Fund application that North Grenville makes. If we could go to the next slide. So this grant or opportunity is being administered by CMHC through the Department of Housing, Diversity and Inclusion with the express purpose to, quote, get more homes built faster, speed up approvals, and develop complete communities. So those would be walkable, mixed use, and climate resilient communities. $4 billion in funding is being proposed until 2026, 2027, and the minimum target being set by the department is 100,000 new permitted housing units across the country. Local governments, which North Grenville is, who have delegated authority over land use planning and development approvals, can make an application for those who are issuing building permits. To successfully make an application, our community is considered to be a large urban center. You know, that's a bit of a misnomer, but it's the way it is. We're greater than 10,000 people. So our action plan has to have a minimum of 7 initiatives that would need to be undertaken. So the purpose of tonight is to get feedback on those 7 initiatives. An action plan is the basis of those initiatives and must be approved by council. So the application deadline itself would be the end of June into mid-August, so there's definitely still some time to consider any and all action plan initiatives that would be part of it. But staff is bringing forward what we think are the 7 best. And in attending some of the seminars for how we could have a successful application, we note that key staff from CMHC have indicated that the best applications will be those that balance infrastructure plus service improvements, plus are addressing the core idea of getting more homes built faster. So we'll ultimately have to demonstrate how, without any of the Housing Accelerator funds, what our base unit number of homes would be built over a 3-year period, and how with the Housing Accelerator Fund we would have that many additional units being built. So the 7 initiatives that are being proposed are broadly into 3 categories. So they include infrastructure, service improvements, and then a couple of keystone projects. So for the infrastructures, I might need some help from Director Dunlop on this, but there's 3 that are being proposed. The first one would relate to siphon upgrades. So that's transporting wastewater from one side of the Kemptville Creek to the north side and upsizing the Curry Street trunk main. That would be one project. The second would be the Bridge Street pump station and its force main, increasing the size and ability of those to deal with wastewater. And finally, upsizing the discharge outfall. So this is a pipe that goes from the existing wastewater treatment plant north to the Rideau River, and it would need to be twinned. So those would be the three infrastructure actions that we would recommend. And through discussions with the Public Works Department, it's been identified that, yeah, if we had some funding to achieve these, we could get those done within a 3-year period. A couple of the soft skills or soft things that would be done would be a building permit software. So this could be extended to the development approval software process with the express purpose of speeding up the number of homes and applications that could be processed and reducing delays for individuals making those applications. And the other one would be zoning reform, and this kind of dovetails nicely with a notice of motion that's been put forward by the Deputy Mayor about looking at ways that our zoning bylaw may, in fact, present barriers to individuals to build homes, and so a comprehensive look at that to see if we could remove those barriers and allow people to have as-of-right uses for the homes they wish to build. And the other two, one would be an accessory dwelling unit incentive program. So we don't know the full details of how it would look, but for example, what it could mean is that there'd be 3 potential stock architectural plans prepared of like a coach house style dwelling, and that those plans could be utilized by members of the public who wished to build a coach house dwelling. In addition to some form of a interest-free loan that could be offered to incent people to build those types of units or to convert a portion of their basement into that type of a unit. And then the final one would be partnering with a not-for-profit property owner in order to see if there's a way to have more affordable housing units built within the community, and it would sort of be a signature project that's as a result of this Housing Accelerator Fund. So ultimately, funding would be provided to municipalities on the basis of how many new units they create. If we were to create, let's just say, 1 new unit and it was a single detached unit, we would receive $20,000 in funding. If we were to have a missing middle type of unit, we would receive between $7,000 and $15,000 in top-up funding. And if that unit was also an affordable unit, we would receive an additional $19,000. So all total, you could end up in a situation where you have about $54,000 for a new unit that's created. Now, obviously not all units would be the missing middle plus affordable, but certainly there would be a set of projections that's prepared to say, here's how many we think there could be. Ultimately, the aim of the program, if successful, is to create lasting systemic change and reduce barriers for the long term. So even beyond the 3 years, you are able to show in your application how it would help create more homes for a 10-year period of time. So that's the 7 initiatives that staff is recommending, and I'm happy to hear any and all feedback. As I say, there would be another opportunity for council to finalize the action plan before it is part of the application. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Comments, questions, any feedback, colleagues? See Deputy Mayor's hand. I have a couple of thoughts, but I'll defer to the Deputy Mayor first. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, to Mr. Mosher. I know in your report you list 11 possible. What was your criteria to winnow it down to 7, or can we submit 11 ideas and have them land on 7 that they're most interested in?
Thank you for the question. Through you, Your Worship, nothing prohibits a municipality from asking for more than 7, but from a success perspective and just a staff resource perspective, 7 is sort of seen as like, that should be the maximum number of initiatives that's put forward. You're correct, there was 11 initiatives that were put down, and then through a little bit of thinking in the department and discussions that we've had, we were encouraged to bring forward like a fulsome list of like what, as staff, we think the 7 initiatives should be. But we wanted to bring 11 in case there was some discussion from council if something that was said tonight isn't tracking with the priorities of this council.
All right, I'll go to Councillor Strahan, and then I'll put myself on the list.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. So I'm looking at the 11 on that list, and the 4 that are under specific projects, the only one that was chosen was the partnering with developers on affordable housing. And, I think that it's no surprise if I say this, that council has struggled with the affordable housing piece significantly in a variety of different ways and all the interconnecting pieces. And the other 3 items on there sort of tie into some of the initiatives that we have for housing. Public transit is one of those, and I know that that work is underway, so maybe that was part of the reason why it wasn't considered. I'm surprised, just given the conversations that we've had in our community growth liaison meetings, where staff has, provided some updates on where things are going to council and so on, that we talk about the emergency protective services side of the house and their needs and wants for future growth and so on. And one of the items on here, now it was specific to a ladder truck, so maybe that specific item is not needed, but I guess I would like to understand why that wasn't moved forward. Perhaps with the chief being here, he'd be able to weigh in on that. But definitely, a lot of these items, I mean, I don't think there's anyone here we could say that isn't worthy of some funding and some investment for a variety of different reasons. But the affordable housing piece, wherever we can emphasize the opportunity to invest in that and to make available opportunities. I know that the report or the document that provides the details on how things can be used does, talk about 3 different investment streams for affordable housing. Is it reasonable to look at adding more than one line that touches on affordable housing, or is it intentional that we're only putting one item related to affordable housing?
Through you, Your Worship. I think the 2 that are being put, so zoning reform certainly does speak to that. Like, there's synergies, and you can't say, point directly, categorically, oh, if you do zoning reform, you get affordable units, but it removes those barriers, so it can be related to. In terms of the ADU fund that would be created, that's obviously directly related to. If there is a fund that's set up with interest-free loans and plans, that would be something that incents that. And then with the signature development, so I think I could say, broadly speaking, 3 of them speak to affordable units themselves. But the other part of the application is that it's this balanced type of application. And if we don't have certain infrastructure investments along the way, it can be challenging to say that we have paved the way or made the lasting change for those other things to come. So your points are well taken. Certainly it's staff's view that this really does assist with it, and I think I could make the case that 3 of these initiatives would be related to affordable housing.
And just if I may, Madam Mayor, so I would like to hear, if we could, from the chief on the emergency side of the house, and whether or not there are any concerns about wanting to see that go forward, in particular to see funding on there, or some rationale as to why that didn't make the cut, if that's possible. And I would just like to say that I know it's always about more homes built faster, and that's how the provincial government has stated this. It's always about moving things faster in the quantity. I think that from our own perspective, I think North Grenville should perhaps take it that it's more better homes built faster, that we're actually investing in the right type of housing for North Grenville and not just wanting to see more growth. And so that's just a sort of an editorial comment there, not expecting anything from you, Mr. Mosher.
So I'll recognize the chief, and then I'll put myself on the list.
Thank you, Mayor Peckford. Through you to Councillor Strachan. Excuse me. Yes, certainly EPS, Emergency Protective Services, were part of the conversation during the planning and expressed comment about our existing resources that we have and the continued growth in North Grenville. And that was part of the extensive discussion, and I know that was included in the list. I can't speak for as where it has landed on the list, but that was part of our conversation. In regards to the ladder truck itself, is with the growth and our future planning for our 20-year capital plan, we definitely have to start looking very close at our inventory of equipment, and that is one item that is a very high expense item to replace, and it is estimated to be replaced in 2031. And the current apparatus that we have would have to be replaced with a larger apparatus based on the development occurring in North Grenville.
And certainly, in brief conversation with planning staff and also just through my own research, I think I think as a smallish, I know we're characterized as a large urban center. That's the way we got characterized for the purposes of this application. Right. But given that I think we're still kind of small potatoes, unfortunately, small cheese, I think it's that blend of things that create some short to midterm impact, which appear to speak to the infrastructure, right? The sort of underground infrastructure that enables some of that growth potentially in the downtown, and to Councillor Strachan's point, ensuring we always have our eye on the ball when it comes to affordability. So my understanding is with the right combination, we definitely stand a better chance of stimulating or creating the conditions for more affordable housing. I mean, that's obviously the objective. So I share Councillor Strachan's want to make sure that's very explicit in our objectives. And I'm hearing, based upon some of our recent discussions, about the need for infrastructure to be in a better state of repair or to be better equipped to facilitate some housing, smaller scale, if you will, housing development in our sort of downtown core or in other parts of the municipality, that this application, should we be lucky enough to receive some of those funds, would open the door to different kinds of growth, right? It's not just about, enabling large subdivisions, right, where we know that some of that is already online. It's really about looking creatively at some other areas and possibilities, and that certainly seems... I'm excited about the prospects of the fund for those reasons, if I've understood your application or your intent for the application. So I'll go to Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Mr. Mosher. I appreciate the work the staff has done, truly, to seize an opportunity, and I understand the deadline's coming up really quickly. And in doing a deep dive on understanding what the guidelines or the criteria were, I really have a lot of faith in staff being able to pick and choose a well-rounded application, and certainly in consultation with our grant writing staff, I think you've been able to read the tea leaves and understand exactly what might be a winning application. And I think, given that it's competitive, the work that's done so far in this community, housing strategy, affordable housing strategy, et cetera, that, if we can craft this application to the funder to let them know that we're at the tipping point and all we need is just a nudge to get us well on the way to creating the conditions to have more attainable and affordable housing. I think I'm excited, like the mayor, that we have great prospects. So I wish us luck. Two questions, or well, I'll just leave it to one question. The maximum would be $54,000 per unit created through executing these initiatives. Is there a cap? What's the projected total that we could receive, realistically? Okay.
Through you, Your Worship, there, as we understand it, there is no cap. And the most recent session that was attended was be bold and aggressive in your proposals. And if I might just add,
yes,
I just wanted to recognize, this is completely a team effort. So with Director Martin and then Susan Smith, the recent grad, and plus senior management, it's a very collaborative process. I get to be here and talk about it, but it's not any one individual. It's certainly we're working together to make this application as staff and council.
I was reflecting on that as you were starting to speak. In some ways, some of the value of the Housing Accelerator Fund is getting, right, different departments in the same room together to really think strategically about are we at that place of a tipping point with a little bit or a lot, but sufficient external resourcing, we could sort of bring the community to a whole other level when it comes to some of that affordable and attainable housing. So to me, it's very exciting. I expect it's a very competitive process. I don't think we can make any assumptions about our success. But that being said, I know that we would make sure to do everything we could to champion, what is a well-conceived application, and really demonstrate that we've done our homework. We are a community that has done our homework time and time again. So we're not new to this issue, and I'm hopeful that all of the discussions on housing typology, housing diversity, affordable housing, and balanced growth would enable us to stand out when it comes to our efforts and our want to truly make a difference. So, I'm very hopeful, and I appreciate all of the conversation and the dialogue, and the minute you guys do your part and submit it, we'll be rooting for you every step of the way. And I know I'm already alerting various levels of government that this application is one we're all behind, and we really want to see some action. So hopefully we'll be blessed enough, and we will have earned our way to some of these dollars, which I think we have. Councillor Trechan.
Perhaps I missed this, but what is the deadline for the application?
Thank you. We understand it to be mid-August, although the actual dates for intake and deadline have not been set.
So I believe at this point you're looking for us to have received the information, right? And to provide any feedback or direction. So I think what you've heard around the table is you're doing some good work and keep on doing it. And obviously you'll find an application by the end of June, July. What's your expectation for a final application or a final draft of an application?
Yes, thank you. So I'll continue to work with Susan Smith, and I know she's been in touch with staff at CMHC, so we'll know when the application window is there. There's a few other little bits and pieces we need to have ready as part of our complete application, and then again we'll come back to council for approval of that action plan. So, but all will be done in advance of the application deadline. Okay, wonderful. So just maybe a mover and a seconder for what we've done this evening, which is to receive and provide some feedback. Thank you, Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Strachan, and I think we've done a good job of really taking in the information, Mr. Mosher, and really commend you and staff for all the work. So we have a mover and a seconder. I'll call the question. All in favor, please. Good. Thank you. So carry on. Best of luck. We'll move on to Public Works. And who is presenting for Public Works? Hi. Hello, Mr. Rowe. And I think Mr. Rowe is here for the Birds Rapids Design Project Award.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. I'm here to discuss the Birds Rapids Hamlet Design Project and the award of the detailed design phase of this project. Next slide, please. In December 2021, the Birds Rapids Conceptual Design Plan was presented and approved by Council. As part of this plan, several next steps were highlighted, including a Heritage Conservation District designation for the hamlet, several detailed investigations and further data collection, and ultimately the detailed design, tendering, and construction. It should be noted that the Heritage Conservation District designation was planned as part of the 2022 budget. However, through further discussions internally with the consultant and the Birds Rapids Community Association, it was deemed that the designation would no longer be needed as the goals of the designation were completed through other means. Next slide, please. As part of the 2023 budget, the Birds Rapids Detailed Design Project was approved. This includes, as noted, further detailed investigation and data collection throughout the community to confirm the assumptions of the conceptual plan, essentially confirming the existing conditions with more detail and any implications of specific design features of the conceptual plan. These investigations and data collection will assist in the development of the detailed design. Next slide, please. From a procurement perspective, the municipality released a request for proposal in late March 2023 which subsequently closed in early May 2023. The municipality received 3 proposals to complete the design project, these being AECOM, McIntosh Perry, and WSP. Next slide, please. All 3 proposals were evaluated in accordance with the original request for proposal and the municipal procurement policy. Based on these evaluations, it is recommended that the municipality award the project to McIntosh Perry for a total sum based on the scope of work and the consultant's proposal of approximately $290,000. Please note that as part of the 2023 budget, staff recommended that $200,000 be approved in both the 2023 and 2024 budget to facilitate this multi-year project. In combination with the recommendation to award this project to McIntosh Perry, it is also recommended that the $200,000 in 2024 for that budget allotment be approved, as the award cannot proceed without the appropriate budget allotment for works to be completed in 2024. Next slide, please. Thank you. This concludes my presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Bro. Deputy Mayor, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Mr. Bro. So what are we asking for pre-approval of a 2024 budget item? Because my understanding is in order to award this contract, we would exhaust the $200,000 that was decided on for this year. We'd be short $92,000, but we're asking for pre-approval of a 2024 budget item. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, exactly. We would require pre-approval of that 2024 budget allotment to proceed with this project.
Yes.
And if only $92,000 are required to trigger this, what are we doing with the other $108,000?
Through you, Madam Mayor. The remaining amount, there are subsequent phases to this project. The deliverable of this project will be the detailed design and associated specifications that will accompany that design. We will require some support through the tendering process and through construction administration or contract administration. So it is anticipated that the remaining funds will be allotted to that phase of the project. However, an update will be provided to council at that time.
Sorry, what time? This fall or next year?
Yeah, through 2024 budget deliberations, okay. An update will be provided.
Certainly, what I think we know is that the design and implementation of the design has been a long time coming, many years of work in the last term of council. So I appreciate that there was a sense of urgency to move to that next phase, which would enable execution of some of the design elements that were ultimately determined by the design firm that had been contracted a number of years ago in conversation with the community. So I see, albeit we're borrowing, if you will, from a future allocation, it seems that without proceeding with this critical phase, we're really in a holding pattern, which I think would be frustrating for all those who put time and energy into getting the design, the conceptual design plan certainly agreed upon and sort of established as our way forward. So any other questions or concerns, council colleagues? Not seeing any. Deputy Mayor, one more?
Yeah, I'll just ask the question, why would we not just approve an additional $100,000 to get the ball rolling? And I appreciate the Mayor's comment in that, you know, it's we wouldn't want to delay this phase of the work because we had to wait for the fall and budget deliberations, et cetera. But, you know, there'll be an update, you're saying, during budget deliberations. Maybe that's the time to commit that other $100,000 for the next piece of it. I'm just wondering why you put the two elements together. I'm not going to call it an overage, but the cost of the detailed design versus some other additional costs or expenses once the detailed design is completed.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Certainly that allotment can be discussed at a future date. However, through these detailed investigations, there is the possibility of additional funds being required through a change order or that sort of contractual agreement. Having extra funds would allow for those change orders without going over budget. However, it can be handled either through either situation, whether the total allotment be approved today or through budget deliberations for 2024.
Ms. Dunlop?
Thank you, Your Worship. So the request in regards to the 200 was placed in because that was the 200 or the 2024 budgetary allotment. As we know, when we open the ground, sometimes surprises do occur. There is ways within the procurement policy that they can be accommodated through a specific. So if that is council's request to do the $300,000 to move this process further, and to come back once we have tender drawings and Class C estimates for construction, that can be considered as we move into the 2024 budget. For probably consideration of construction not starting until 2025.
Right, okay. Deputy Mayor?
I'm sorry. I just think that's the more prudent way to go.
Okay, so let's proceed in that manner. So really what you would need is an allocation of 100 of the 200 that was foreseen for 2024. Is that right,
Exactly.
Mr. Rowe?
I have the exact number if you would like it, but
No,
approximately
let's just
$100,000.
call it a day, say 100,000. And then if of other needs become apparent prior to the 2024 budget that enable the project to move forward, then you could flag those with us earlier than 2024. Is that right?
Exactly. We would be following the procurement policy
Exactly.
for North Grenville,
Yeah.
and we would move forward through that.
So this adjustment doesn't imperil your capacity to move forward at the present time?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Certainly, I think there is a bit of a sense of urgency, so I think we want to honor that. But Ms. Dunlop.
Sorry, taxes, Madam Mayor. So the value of the contract is $292,300 plus tax. So if we could change that allotment to roughly cover off those, it
Sure.
would be appreciated. Thank
Do
you.
you know what that number is?
I will.
Okay. Okay. So while we await the final math, the agreement at this stage is that we'll take
331,000, Madam Mayor.
331,000. So you need 131 draw from the expected 200,000 that was to be spent next year.
In 2024.
Yes, correct. Okay, so the request is now for that additional 131, right? That's part of what we're advancing here, correct?
Yes, Madam Mayor. So the recommendation is that Council authorize the Director of Public Works to award the contract valued at $292,355, excluding taxes, plus approve the request of $131,000 as part of the 2024 budget.
Excellent. I'll look for a mover and a seconder, please. Deputy Mayor, need a seconder? Councillor Sullivan, okay. Any final comments or concerns? Not seeing any. I'm calling the question. All in favor, please. Okay. Best of luck. Best of luck.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm sure it will all go well, and I know the association will be very pleased with this development, so thank you. Okay. With this excellent audio experience we're having in this room, thank you very much to our external audio provider for giving us this wonderful sound. It's really unprecedented that we can be this well heard in this room. I think we're nearing the end, colleagues. It's been a long day, as some of us are aware. So we have dealt with other items under Public Works. As part of our consent agenda, correspondence was all dealt with under consent. We just have two other items before we move to introduction and consideration of bylaws, heyday fee forgiveness. So as was part of our discussion during our community grants process, I think members of council, not to speak for any of you, but my understanding is that there was an appetite to look at forgiveness of municipal rental fees in instances where events were 100% local and we're putting 100% of proceeds back into the community. We know that Hay Day is coming up. They've opted to use the municipality for the purposes of one of Ontario's largest indoor garage sales. And every dollar of that revenue that's generated from the community will be directed back to Kemptville District Hospital. And as a consequence, there was some dialogue about whether or not we could forgive their fees. Now, we've asked Mr. Guy, and I know we're expecting a policy to come forward that would propose forgiveness of not just one specific organization's fees, where 100% of revenues generated stay in the community for the purposes of a charitable effort. But I think, Mr. Guy, you're not quite there yet. So really at this point, we are responding to these requests on a one-off basis. So with Hay Day coming up this weekend and the considerable efforts in this community to get a CT scanner at our Kemptville District Hospital, which is something that will require all hands on deck, I wanted to raise the notion of fee forgiveness for the use of the municipality for Hay Day in particular in advance of their event, because I know it would mean a lot to them. So with that in mind, colleagues, invite any comments or questions, or I'll look for a mover and a seconder for a motion. Councillor Sullivan? Thank you. Councillor Strachan? So the motion at this moment is to fully forgive the Hay Day fees attached to use of the municipal facility. Councillor Strachan, are you seconding or asking a question? Sure. Okay, so you've seconded, and now I'll have you ask the question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The point regarding the reimbursement or the waiving of fees, I think it's important that we do come up with a policy, because right now we're only tackling the big groups that come forward to ask for that fee forgiveness, and I think it eliminates the smaller groups and community organizations that are certainly very local and do contribute back into the community. So that's more a point. The question that I have is, I wasn't quite sure in the statement that you just made. Did the Hay Day organizing committee come to you asking for the fee waiving, or are you requesting it on their behalf?
No, they flagged it with me.
Okay,
that by using this spaces versus the curling rink, they were incurring considerably more expense than they had in the past.
Yeah, understood. Okay, thank you, just for clarification.
For sure.
Perfect.
And I agree, Mr. Guy, maybe you can speak to, I think you've heard loud and clear from council for a number of months now that we'd like to set a policy where a certain number of hours, right, or a certain threshold of local groups who are raising money specifically for the community for charitable purposes, such as the hospital, what have you, would have a portion or all of their fees forgiven. I know you have lots on your plate. When would you expect a policy to come forward that would allow us to not just respond to the big asks, to Councillor Strachan's point, but the small ones?
Thank you, Your Worship, for the question. I can tell you that at the SMT table, we've discussed a review of all of our fees and charges throughout the municipality, not just for Parks and Recreation. So I think as a team, we're looking to do that collaboratively. That would also include the waiving of fees for charitable or fundraising events here at the Municipal Center.
And with that
I have done some research and have received. There are other municipalities who are doing this, so we have received some of that information from them to sort of help us, guide us along the way. I can tell you in 2022, I asked staff to look at all the fundraising events that were here at the Municipal Center, strictly fundraising events, and amounted to about a little over $7,000 of rental fees. So not a large amount.
Okay, so I know with Hay Day upon us, we wanted to get ahead of this one because we've lost a couple of opportunities with, I think, smaller groups that are also fundraising and keeping 100% of their funds local for charitable efforts. But certainly, we'd welcome an interim policy that looked at forgiveness of fees up to a certain amount, $10,000 or something that would allow us to be a little more flexible and responsive to some of those smaller organizations. So if that could be an interim measure, that would at least give you and council some capacity to respond throughout the year. But Hay Day certainly is top of mind, as I think it is for many of us, because it's a big event and they're working extremely hard to raise every dollar for our local hospital.
Well, maybe what we could do is we can take this off the bigger project and sort of look at it individually to get something in front of council a little bit quicker.
Great, that would be wonderful. Thank you. But in the meantime, we have a mover and a seconder for the waiving of municipal usage fees attached to being in this building for the Hay Day event. I appreciate the mover and seconder. If there are no other questions, I'll call the vote. All in favor, please? Good, thank you. I appreciate that very much. Next, I think we have a notice of motion. Is this from you, Councillor Sullivan? Okay, and I understand with notice of motions, you provide the notice, but you don't speak to it for a couple of weeks. That's my understanding. Is that correct procedurally? Okay. I expect there's going to be lots of debate on this one, though. It's a big change, what you're potentially proposing, I think. So that's good, and I've lost my place on the agenda, Ms. Jeannot. I think we're now towards consideration of bylaws. Is there anything specific we have to consider this evening?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought by tabling the notice of motion, it is, you have notified us, or is there further that is required?
Through your worship, so typically the councillor who would like to bring a motion forward will read the motion, and this first motion you'll notice says that, it's not actually a motion, but it's just a notice saying that council review, and I'll let Councillor Sullivan finish that herself and explain if she'd wish. And then the next motion that'll come forward at the next council meeting will be that council directs staff. So at that point, staff will then move forward and eventually come back with a report.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you to Ms. Jeannot for the advice regarding this process. So the notice of motion is that council review bylaw 61-14 to consider the inclusion of domestic cats in the running at large section of that bylaw.
Okay, so notice has been served. So we'll move on then to introduction and consideration of bylaws. I don't believe any of these need to be considered separately. Is that right, Ms. Jeannot? Okay. So questions, anyone from members of our community? Yes? Oh. Okay. So certainly, I think for clarity's sake, in a couple of weeks, this item will be discussed. So no direction has been provided. Councillor Sullivan is asking that this discussion be had at the council table. So at this stage, nothing has materialized other than Councillor Sullivan advising that she would like us to have that discussion at the council table. That would happen in a couple of weeks. So I don't think we're at the decision-making phase at all, but I hear perhaps what are reservations, but should you have an interest in this discussion, we can certainly let you know when that, when the notice of motion will be addressed in full. Any other questions or, yes, go ahead, Ms. Westendorp. Thank you. You've been here a long time too. Congrats on this staying power.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have no kids at home tonight, by the way. So
I don't
this is
know how
I'm
that
spending
happened.
My free night. I know,
Okay.
it's crazy. First question might be a dumb one. I'm not sure. What is the $331,000 for in terms of a design for Burt's Rapids? What are we designing?
Right. Mr. Rowe, Ms. Dunlop, whoever. Do you have other questions as Mr. Rowe is coming down? Okay.
Yeah,
so let's
come on
reserve that
down.
for the end. Keep going.
Let's share.
Do you want to ask your other questions or get this answer first? Mr. Rowe's here now, so, okay. Okay.
Hi, through you, Madam Mayor. The detailed design that will be completed for Burt's Rapids will be based off of the conceptual design approved in December of 2021. So some of the areas of focus that we will be looking at are drainage improvements throughout the hamlet, some lighting improvements, asphalt that needs to be reconstructed, some parking modifications, and pedestrian and active transportation improvements. Those are some of the heavy hitters, if you will, but the full conceptual plan can be found on our website.
Follow up. So is this a design of public spaces in Birds Rapids that's being undertaken?
Exactly. All of the improvements will be focused within the municipal right-of-way. There are improvements that are focused within the United Counties right-of-way, related to parking and pedestrian and active transportation modes of travel. But yes, definitely within municipal road allowances.
I think what you mean is within municipal responsibilities, so roads, sidewalks, lighting.
Exactly.
Ways to slow traffic down in busy intersections. And my understanding at the 10,000-foot level is Birds Rapids has never really had a well-conceived approach, right, to some of those roads and sidewalks and the way that areas are lit that allow people to obviously enjoy their hamlet, but just in terms of sheer roads management, there's a lot of work to be done to ensure that everything is integrating together nicely. Is that a fair way to put it? Exactly, and some areas that we will need to expand on are due to the heritage characteristics of the hamlet. The existing municipal right-of-ways are much more narrow than we would see elsewhere within the municipality. So there are some considerations where the municipal property and the private property, you can't adjust one without affecting the other. So there are some implications that way that will need to be considered. An easy one to visualize is, let's say there are mature trees in the area. Obviously, we would want to stay away from those and provide the appropriate mitigating measures to ensure that those trees are protected. And I use that as an example because it's a very visual example, but there are the hamlet is also on private services, so there are septics and wells and those type of private facilities that need to be considered. But the works will be focused within the municipal right-of-way. Right-of-way being largely municipal roads. Exactly. Right. So, yeah, roads and ditches and and anything that you would typically find in or adjacent to municipal roads. Yes.
Do you know the amount of kilometers of municipal roadways in Birds Rapids offhand? Or Karen?
I do not. I can definitely follow up with you.
It's like this big.
It is. Unfortunately, I can't give the exact number of kilometers. But.
I'll defer to Ms. Dunlop or Councillor Barclay. Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to provide some context for Jen. Birds Rapids has been talking about how to preserve the unique historic character of their town. They're justifiably proud of it. They've got a very active community association that's over the last 10 years have been talking about how to preserve the historic nature of their hamlet, while at the same time, the municipality building standards and road construction has changed since the 1800s. And so, there's drainage issues that would normally be addressed a certain way, but in consideration of the historic character of it, we've had to be very careful about how to go about mitigating, stormwater and sight lines for traffic and parking issues. I think it's to the benefit of the entire municipality to preserve the historic character of our hamlets, especially Birds Rapids. For tourist values and just for character of the municipality per se.
Ms. Dunlop, I think you want to add?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So in order to complete that detailed design, there's a couple studies that we have to start with. We have to do topographical and legal surveys. There's soil samples. There's archaeological and environmental assessments that have to feed into the idea of what a detailed design. So exactly what Mr. Bro identified, that we are not impacting the existing heritage structures, affecting the lots, or improving the drainage on the lots, because that is one of the things over years and years and years. We sometimes do asphalt over asphalt, so it's raised the elevation of a road. We have to look at what the topographical features are and take it back to that step and that original look.
Is that why the design is so costly, in order to maintain the heritage characteristics?
Through you, Madam Mayor, if there is a specific community, it's not the fact that it's a heritage design that's costing the idea. It is these are standard steps that would have to be undertaken in order to complete the capital improvements that are required to bring back the hamlet itself, to accommodate the stormwater adjustments that are required. But we are taking the heritage features in consideration as we go through these capital and civil reviews to create the detailed design.
Is there, Ryan had mentioned it's a phased approach. How many years is this project expected to span?
So at this time, from the detailed design perspective and the data collection and detailed investigations, that's anticipated to be completed by November or approximately November 2024 in anticipation of budget deliberations. One part of this detailed design is looking at anticipated budget allotments for future years and other priorities to create a phased approach to because it's not expected that the municipality will be able to complete all aspects of the detailed design at one time due to budget constraints and several other factors. So the phasing of the construction will be part of the detailed design project.
So you have no idea until the detailed design is complete, the estimated cost of the phase project?
At this time, I believe there was we call it a Class D cost estimate for the project, but until we get into further investigations, we won't know exactly, we won't be able to bring that Class D estimate to a more accurate or more detailed costing. I will say that we don't necessarily need to wait till the end of that, end of the detailed design project. It will be a working cost estimate throughout the project, so we will be able to use that to guide our works towards a final product, being the detailed design.
And if I might, I think if you want to do a deeper dive, it might be a good idea to maybe talk with Ryan and Karen right after this meeting, if you want full benefit of other aspects of the project, not to cut this off, but it's certainly, I think there's more context, I think, Ryan, that you could offer. And certainly their Birds Rapids Community Association has been a good partner, so it might be valuable to talk to them as well.
I think I'm just behind because 2021 was a COVID time for me and I was living in my home. So,
Indeed.
I do have a couple questions for Phil Mosher as well regarding, sorry, my brain is shutting down.
Yes, the Housing
Accelerated
Accelerator
Housing Fund. You had mentioned that there's a potential to get $54,000 per unit through this fund. Is that per unit built or the creation of opportunity to build a unit? I'm a little confused about how that funding model works. Like, you're getting $54,000 as a municipality to build one unit, or are you getting $54,000 for creating the potential to have another unit?
Great questions. So the way the funding would work is you would get, I'm happy to provide you this information in an email if you want, but you'd get 25% of the funding upon signing the funding agreement. So a municipality has, or an applicant has to prepare two sets of numbers. The first set of numbers is, if we didn't have the Housing Accelerator Fund, how many units would there be created in a 3-year span from 2024 to 2026? If we had the Housing Accelerator Fund, how many additional units? And what's that difference? Of that difference, not every unit would automatically receive $54,000 in funding. $20,000 is the base funding for one unit, and then there's between $7,000 and $15,000 of top-up if it's a missing middle type of unit, and an additional $19,000 if it's an affordable housing unit. So you could get up to a theoretical maximum of 54. So all that to say, you prepare your base case, and then you prepare if we were successful with the funding and we did all of these projects, how many additional units, and then that difference is what allows you to obtain funding. As an example, if you said we were going to build an additional 300 units at an average of 30-something thousand, you know, you'd do the math and you'd figure out how much funding you'd be eligible for.
How many units is the municipality applying for through this fund?
So we don't know that number yet, but what we can say is that in the long-term average, the 5-year for new home starts, the average is about 169 new home starts every year. So we would look at that number as the base, and we would see how much additional on top of that would we be able to create if successful with the funding application.
Thank you. One more question, I swear. This is for Councillor O'Sullivan. This matter with proposed changes to bylaw, I forget the number, forgive me, regarding domestic cats. What was the reason for bringing this forward as a notice of motion?
That's for next.
I think it's fair. She's given a notice of motion. I think she can be asked a question. Go ahead, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. It's partially based on concerns and complaints that have been brought forward to me from residents who've had issues with domestic cats on their property, on their private property, and doing damage to their private property. And so and when I look at the existing bylaw, running at large, all of the items and the points only refer to dogs. And if you own a domestic cat, I think it should be kept, it can be an outdoor cat, but it has to be kept on your own property, not roaming at large. Okay.
I have some follow-ups, but I can ask you after. I will step away from the mic now. Payback for starting late.
We're very happy to have local media in the room, so appreciate your attention to detail, Jen, so thank you. Thank you. It doesn't hurt to have others who are paying attention and engaging and demonstrate a lot of curiosity for what council is doing, so thank you. We did make you wait a long time to get into the meeting, so fair game. All right, I think we're nearing adjournment now. We just have the confirmation bylaw. That is that bylaw 6423 to confirm proceedings of council at its regular meeting held on June 6th, be adopted and passed. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Wilson, whose face I haven't been able to see all. There we go. Hello, Councillor Wilson. All right, so Councillor Wilson, Councillor Strachian will move in second. Confirmation bylaw. I will call the vote. All in favor, please. As if there's anything to reconfirm at this stage. And a motion to adjourn, which is non-debatable. Councillors O'Sullivan and Barclay, thank you. We are adjourning at 8:52 p.m. All in favor, please. Good motion. Meeting is adjourned, and thank you certainly to our audio team for exceptional